The reason intellectual property is such an important part of globalization was once you disarticulate production, you don't control your blueprints and how things are made, because you've got factories all over the world, and industrial espionage much easier. The idea of reverse engineering products can be easily done and so on, which is why they banned reverse engineering, if you remember this, in the last GATT round, in the TRIPS agreement. It has a section on neoliberalism. It goes into what we call the tax strike. The elite has gone on strike. They refuse to pay tax last 50 odd years. It goes into the investment strike. When you disarticulate production, big firms don't need to invest in production. They subcontract a lot of stuff, and then you get small capital around the world, let's say in Haiti, mid-level capital investing in small factories that sew shirts for the Disney corporation. Disney invests nothing in there, so we call that the investment strike. You have enormous profits coming into these companies. They put it into the financial casino, a term that Fidel Castro used to like to use. There's so much money swishing about because these people are not investing their money. You know that. I mean, since 2007-8, the Federal Reserve opened the tap. Money is basically free. The money is not being invested. Banks are holding on to it. They are basically what we call constipated. They are holding capital for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes in liquid form, sometimes it's invested in financial instruments and so on. $32 trillion is the minimum amount we've calculated sitting in tax havens. That's a considerable amount of money, 32 trillion. We have a section on imperialism and so on, but I'll pause. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can find it and read it. The reason I wanted to bring this up, in 1978, when China began the reform era, it's a much misunderstood era, and I don't want to go into it in much detail, but I would like to say that in poorer nations, I wrote about the South Commission, where Julius Nyerere, very concerned that intellectually the countries of the South simply didn't have the intellectual capacity to deal with what was happening. The Brand Commission had failed to talk about inequality. There was a meeting at Cancun in '81. Ronald Reagan was the star of that meeting. He just laughed, joked. At the airport, he made such swift jokes. He said, you people, they're not poor. You just need to come up with good ideas and work hard. And people laughed. And, it was the end of, it was terrible. I mean, Willy Brandt was heartbroken, honestly. They'd worked hard to produce the North-South report. They arrived in Cancun. The Mexican government was 100% behind some discussion. Guess why? Because they had to just file for bankruptcy. You remember this in the third world debt crisis. This is '81. Mexico goes into receivership. So here we are. We're at this period when Nyerere says we're lost. We don't have an idea. So they empanel the South Commission. Nyerere is the chair. Manmohan Singh, later the Prime Minister of India, is the General Secretary of the Commission. I went through all their papers, which are sitting in a bomb shelter in Geneva. I spent a very great time sitting in that bomb shelter, going through all the documents which had the minutes of the meetings and the debates. The Chinese delegate was very interesting, kept insisting, listen, fellas, he kept saying, we are going to go into this project in a different way because we want science transfer and technology transfer. From Pakistan, the person who was there at some of the meetings was a physicist, Abdul Sattar, and he said, look, don't just ask for the transfer of technology, you've got to transfer science. If you're not doing pure science in your countries, you'll be lost. You'll just get yesterday's technology. You have to create tomorrow's science, not yesterday's technology. You have to go 2 generations ahead in tech. The Chinese in that meeting said, we are not going to allow investment to come in unless there's science and tech transfer. I found this very useful because when eventually they set up Shenzhen, after Deng Xiaoping goes to Singapore, meets Lee Kuan Yew and says, how did you do it? I mean, it's a fantastic meeting. He meets Lee Kuan Yew, says, how did you do this to Singapore? I get Singapore is a small place, but we're interested. Lee Kuan Yew says, these are the 10 things. Deng Xiaoping leaves and says, not interesting. Not interesting, why? Because it's the port, and because they are under the US umbrella, nuclear shield and so on. We need tech and science transfer. They didn't do that. You know how in the WTO in the last 10 years, the French photovoltaic cell, the companies have been trying to sue China in the WTO, saying they stole our intellectual property, and the Chinese are really, but wait a minute. Remember this contract you signed with us? in which you agreed to science and tech transfer as the price of coming and exploiting our labor. Remember this? Well, you know, we have it. That's the signature of your CEO. So I don't know if we stole anything because you gave it to us. China today is the world's leader in the production of photovoltaic cells and so on.